Welcome to this week's coursework on managing conflict in relationships. Hopefully this coursework will be really powerful for you to change some of the dynamic in your relationships, much like that of the listening coursework, which I've had positive reviews from you on. So let's go ahead and delve in. First of all, let's define conflict. Conflict is differences between and among people. It takes people to have conflict. And typically, conflict occurs when there are incompatible activities, disagreements, different points of view, different expectations. And conflict is a situation that includes differences, expressed struggle, frustration, interference, perceptions, and interdependence. And interdependence is so critical because of that relationship and the interdependence of people who have relationships. So take a quick moment to think about the nouns, verbs, adjectives that describe conflict. Are they negative or positive? Conflict is usually associated with negative emotion. But thinking about conflict as a situation, removing the emotion, it actually can be quite positive. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Why do we avoid conflict? I think because fear plays a great component of why we avoid conflict, because we're about ready to engage in an unknown outcome of how the communicative event is going to take place, or the outcome of that communicative event. So we're fearful of it. The other reason is because it causes a lot of emotional upheaval because of the imbalance of power. We have to give up some of our power in order to engage and resolve in conflict. And it's because we have incompatibilities within our relationships, specifically intimate relationships. We have incompatibilities, and those are really hard to get through and struggle through. Conflict is often associated with negative feelings, and not very many people like to feel negative. And the other thing about conflict is it takes time, and sometimes we just don't have the time for it. So we choose not to engage because, honestly, we just don't have the time. So conflict and power. This is probably the most critical component in regards to conflict, is recognizing the struggle of power or for power within our interdependent relationships. And there are scarce resources in our money, our time, and just how much attention we can give to varying people. So it is because of these three piles of resources that conflict typically takes place. So a factor that affects conflict and power in a relationship is that one person has power over another because they control something. And so we might lack power, and our partner might have more power in that area. For example, money. In your household, is there a breadwinner, somebody that makes more money than you? And so there's perceived power that, and perceived, I say, very notably, that since they might make more money in the house, that they have more decision-making in how that money is spent. That is conflict and power. In balancing a relationship, we need to honestly find our common interests, rather than identifying the things in which we're different within a relationship. It's to find the common interests, common goals, how you can improve in the relationship, and then defining what you need. Because through defining what you need, you can better express your needs to the other person, so it's very clear and concise. There is a 5-step model, which I want to review with you, in conflict management. And this is important considering our overall coursework for the week. And it is just a good rule of thumb because it's a circular approach to understanding conflict. First is assessment, and that is to examine the context of the communication environment. Consider who the conflict is with and what your relationship with them is. And then, therefore, identify the area of contention. And assessing the conflict situation also will help you determine how much time you want to take in trying to resolve the conflict. If it's just somebody in another car in the grocery store parking lot, you might not really want to take that much time to get out of your car and go discuss with them your difficulties or disagreements about one parking spot. just not going to be worth it. Acknowledgement. Understand and articulate both sides of you. And this is a reality check of perceptions. And this is also where listening and truly understanding another person's perspective comes into a key factor. To really listen and hear what another person is saying. Attitude. Develop and display an attitude conducive to productive interaction. So don't shut down, don't mind read, and give appropriate nonverbal cues to show that you are open to dialogue. And this involves a lot of trust and displaying the symbols of trust both through language and your nonverbal communication. Action. Keeping the channels of communication open to find mutually agreeable solutions. Again, this goes back to the skill set of being an active, participative listener to regurgitate or give paraphrasing statements that you understand the other person's perspective, and listening to what the other person needs and clearly stating what you need so you can find mutually agreeable solutions. Analysis. And consider the feasibility and effectiveness of the decisions that are made. Based on this model, 5-step model, you might have to circle back around again and start with assessment all over again. And the other thing to keep in mind is that usually conflict is not about one issue. There are varying layers of conflict that build into a situation. So let's not forget that, but this is a fairly easy way to break down how to approach conflict and try to find some resolution to it. Take one topic at a time. The number one thing I want you to remember above all else in regards to this week's coursework is to remember that emotion comes first. And this actually is a picture of my daughter. And if any of you have kids, you know that you can't talk to a screaming child. It's extremely difficult. So you have to deal with how they feel. Are you mad? Are you frustrated? Did you hurt yourself? Are you hurt? So verifying the emotion and actually distinguishing the emotion in the way of let it air out, let the emotion run its course, and then deal with the issue or the difference of power. So acknowledge somebody being frustrated, mad, or sad, and let them work through those phases of emotion before you say, okay, now let me understand why you're so angry with me. If I understand the reason for why you're so angry, then maybe we can work to resolve those issues of anger and our differences about why you became so angry. So handle emotion first. Let's then talk about conflict and language differences based on gender. It's not rocket science to know that men and women speak differently. So, men are typically very much more direct in their communication, and they talk about one topic at a time. And they're very focused on fixing it. Let's solve the problem. Let's just solve it and move on. And they're typically more closed about personal issues and how their personal emotions or feelings play into a situation. And so they're more closed in that regard. On the other hand, women do a lot of hinting language. Oh my goodness. Did you know I had to get up at 5 o'clock this morning? That's hinting language at, I'm really tired, worn out, don't want to deal with this right now. And women can easily transition quickly between new topics, restart old ones, and dig up baggage that was 3 or 4 months old. So unless an issue really has been resolved and is closed, they will dig it up again and it'll resurface in a totally different situation that might not be related to the power struggle currently being discussed. And women are much more open to discuss emotions than as compared to men. Other differences is that men's minds work like a filing cabinet. They deal with one drawer at a time. They have in their little filing cabinet things related to work, family, social, and then alone. And they usually don't really intermingle. If they're dealing with work, they're dealing with work. If they're alone, on the couch, in their little dark cave. That's where they want to be. Whereas women, we've talked about multitasking before and how the brain works with the corpus callosum. All drawers of the mind are open at once, and they can skip, jump topics at their will and prerogative because all drawers are open in their minds. So, the benefits of conflict. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes a lot of diligence to make sure that emotions are heard, and then to go through the 5-step model process to assess, analyze, and come up with varying solutions to a conflict. But the benefits are that typically better decision making comes out of conflicting situations, and this goes for work and personal. And overall, debate improves the quality of the solution. You just might not necessarily want to go through the process. I know sometimes I don't. There is increased learning through exchange of ideas. And once again, this takes a lot of skill in regards to listening, but there's increased learning when you really truly listen to what somebody has to contribute. There's relational growth that fosters trust and respect after a conflict is resolved. And in the long run, conflict saves time by finding the best, not just the simplest or the easiest solution, but really truly finding the best solution to a conflict. So that should be motivation enough for you to overcome the fears in approaching a conflict, is to potentially find the best solution that can foster trust and respect within your relationships.